I'm actually the Academic Integrity Initiatives Coordinator for the College of Arts and Sciences. The university does not have that position, although it would be nice if we did. And currently, the College of Arts and Sciences is the only college that has an academic integrity coordinator. So I realize that I'm speaking to people from all colleges, but I've given you all my contact information. If you have questions, I will try to help. I have given you have slides, right? You have copies of the slides. I have given you way more information than I can possibly cover in 30 minutes. And I did that on purpose because there's a lot of stuff that's specific maybe to your discipline that you won't need to sit here and listen to me go over for somebody else's discipline. So all I will say is please, please, please go back and read through all the slides, because I'm going to hit some of the high spots, but there may be other things, other teaching tips, other suggestions, other ideas on the slides that may be more specific to your particular field. So don't neglect to use that as a resource, okay? So, and my email address is on the first slide. You're welcome to email me anytime during the year if you have any questions. So the first slide is has a link at the bottom to the International Center for Academic Integrity. That is the governing body for all issues academic integrity. And I've included this strictly to give you some vocabulary in case you need some vocabulary for creating a syllabus statement, or for talking with students, or for talking with anybody that you might need to talk with about academic integrity issues. So don't forget that this slide is here that maybe has some useful vocabulary for you. There's a world of information also if you follow this link, okay? I've also given you, just for your information for later, I've given you the academic honor policies for the university on this slide and the next, and also the links to where you can go and find those policies if you're putting them on your syllabus, and I hope you are, okay? So this is just informational that you can come back to later. Okay, so there are basically two types of academic integrity faux pas, if you want to call them that. One is intentional, and intentional is when somebody just sets out to cheat. They buy a paper and turn it in as their own. They copy something from somebody. They cut and paste something from the internet. It's one of those things that everybody knows is wrong, and it's a personal choice to do that wrong thing, okay? We might be able to prevent some of that. We might be able to educate students to avoid doing some of that. But mostly what I deal with are students who do the second type of academic misconduct, and that's unintentional. These are students who just don't know any better. They may be sloppy. They may have sloppy citation practices. They just don't take good notes. Or they don't know how to handle group work or collaboration. They don't know if they should cite something they hear one of their peers say in a group project as not their own original idea. People who maybe get a little bit too much help from friends. We have a lot of situations where students will study together and their papers will then be very, very similar. They don't intend to cheat, they just accidentally kind of stumble into it by trying to do the right thing. We get a lot of papers turned in that have sources included in a work cited, but all the quotations from those sources, none of them is in quotation marks. That is technically plagiarism, but the student attempted to do the right thing by citing the source, and maybe even mentions the author's name somewhere in the middle of copying and pasting a whole paragraph from that source. So those are things that are, we tend to call those poor academic practices, and those are the people that I primarily work with, the people who, we used to call it catch and release. We would catch them, and then they would just get some kind of punishment and released back into the general population. And now in the College of Arts and Sciences, they come to me for some remediation so that we are giving them some support and some help with the specific problems that they're having. So these are the two kinds of things that you might see in your, particularly in your written work. And I realize there are other kinds of academic misconduct, lab reports, computer code sharing, that sort of thing. So again, I can't address every major specific problem that you're going to see, but if you do start seeing things, you need to report that to your chair and handle it the way the university sets out for you to handle it. There are, though, across the spectrum, there are general conditions for cheating, and I have given you those here. I do want to go over those briefly. Students who tend to have external rather than internal motivation, in other words, they like to be praised for having completed something rather than having that internal feeling that a lot of us have when we try something and do it well, or do it, at least just do it. The students who like to be praised for completion are more likely to cheat than the students who throw themselves into a task just for the joy of doing the task. If there's a strong emphasis on winning, if there's a focus on the performance, you ran the race and you finished the race, or you ran the race and you came in first place, instead of, wow, you learned how to run really well, instead of mastery of a task, those students who are more focused on their performance rather than the mastery of the task are probably going to be likely to cheat. Where there are high stakes riding on the outcome, you've got one shot to take this test to get into college. That lends itself to cheating. If students think something is pointless, if it's not clear to them why they're being asked to perform a task, why they're being asked to do a certain assignment in your class, if that's not crystal clear to them, sometimes it doesn't matter to them then. They have low investment, and when you have low investment, you're more likely not to care whether you cheat or not, okay? Also, if there's a lot of pressure, sometimes parental pressure, sometimes scholarship pressure. I have to make this grade to keep my scholarship. I have to make this grade to stay in my sorority. I have to make this particular grade for whatever reason. If there's a fear of failure, then sometimes students will make a bad choice and they will cheat, okay? Also, a lack of confidence. I've never been a very good math student. I've never been a very good biology student. I don't know anything about computers. My high school didn't have a foreign language. I don't feel very comfortable taking this course. We all know that lack of comfort is an educational opportunity. When we're not comfortable, that's when we start to learn things, new things. But for students who have left the high school nest, very often that lack of confidence. I've always made A's in high school, and now I'm in this language course, and I've never had a language course before. That lack of confidence might lead them to make poor choices. And remember, I keep saying it over and over again. These are choices that students make, okay? And peer pressure, we know also leads students. If everybody else in the class, if it's perceived that everybody else is doing it, then students are more likely to try it themselves, okay? So in other words, and I've given you kind of a synopsis here, cheating is likely to happen when getting the win, when getting the grade, when getting the credential becomes more important than the thing that we feel as as educators, I assume that you all are here because you know the joy of learning. When getting those credentials becomes more important than the personal satisfaction of learning and doing your best at a task, even if it's not the best in the class, if it's your personal best, there's joy in that. There's joy in learning new things. Students are more likely, cheating is more likely to happen when students are more focused on the certification, the grade, than the content that you're sharing with them. When the task seems unimportant, when it seems like busy work, or when it seems impossible to complete. I have no time, and I've got this 20-page paper to do, and I don't have a clue how to get started with it. This is impossible. I'm going to go to the internet and I'm going to see what's out there. I'm not intending to cheat, but I'm just going to see what's out there to maybe get my brain started, and all of a sudden, wow, here's a paper that says exactly what I was going to say, and while it says it kind of cool, it's better than I would say it, so the teachers probably, they won't know, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and get this. That's a choice. So what we want to avoid, I'll get to this on the next slide, but what we want to avoid is having students in situations where they have to make those choices. Okay, so let's talk about what works and what doesn't work in your classrooms. Research in academic integrity and academic misconduct, all the research that's been done shows us that punishment or threats of punishment absolutely do not work. You can tell students all day, I'm going to turn you in to the dean's office, you're going to get expelled from the university, you're going to get a 0 in this class. I don't know what your particular college, each college has different guidelines and different punishments, so I'm just kind of throwing out some ideas, but even if you put that on your syllabus, what your college's punishments are and what the stakes are for the students if they do make this choice, it does not matter. When they are in a moment of crisis and they have to make a choice to do the wrong thing or the right thing, if those conditions for cheating are present in their lives, they might make the wrong choice, okay? So fear of punishment does not work. So what does work? We have to think about academic integrity as an environmental issue. We cannot control, we have absolutely no power to control what our students do. We don't have any control over whether they ate breakfast before they came to take your test. We don't have any control over whether they stayed up all night cramming for some other test that they also have that day. We have no control over whether they decided to go with 3 or 4 friends to a bar and stay out all night. We have no control over whether they have insomnia, whether they're over-medicated. We have absolutely no control over any of the variables in our students' lives. What we do have control over is our classroom environment. So that's where you need to put your focus in trying to combat academic integrity problems, okay? And you need to be proactive about it. And on the remaining slides, I'm going to touch on a few ideas, but remember that the slides are full of other ideas as well, okay? As are the links that I've also given you, okay? So course design, assignment design, syllabus design, those are things you can control. So let's talk about some ideas, okay? So one of the things that we can do, and you'll notice that these slides match up with those conditions for cheating. This is how to address those conditions that might be present in your students' lives. So one thing I want to talk about is, sorry, I have to turn the page. So one thing I want to talk about are some suggestions for student engagement. And I'm just going to mention, because that's what intrinsic motivation is. It's having a student be engaged in your course and being there and being interested in your course material for the joy of learning it, rather than because it's a required class. So I just want to mention one thing, and that's something you can do from the very start. It's something you can do on the very first day, and it seems like such an obvious and a small thing. It's how you approach that very first moment when you step up and talk to your students for the very first time. You want to show enthusiasm for your course. This may be a subject matter that your students have not done well in before. It may be a requirement. They may already have heard horror stories about this particular course. If you set the tone from the very first minute that this is a wonderful course, it's fun, it's exciting, and if you explain to them very clearly why the class matters, how does it fit in not only with their possible career goals, their career paths, but how does it fit in with their lives? I teach mostly freshman English, so I know what I'm talking about when I say that there are courses that students just don't like. I have to sell them from day one, from minute one, on the idea that that first year composition is going to be a valuable course for them, and it's going to be great fun. Okay, so that's just such a simple thing, but that's one way you can get buy-in from your students, is with the way you approach the course material. If they see that it's important to you, it's more likely to become important to them. Okay? So, for those students who are performance-driven rather than mastery of the subject-driven, one suggestion, and again, there's a bunch of suggestions here, but one suggestion, and I'm not talking about teaching to the test, I'm talking about preparing your students for the kinds of assessments you're going to have on your syllabus. What do you want them to know? What do you want them to learn? How do you want them to show you that they've learned that? If it's a test, if it's a paper, if it's some kind of a lab experiment, some kind of a lab report, whatever it is that you have set up in your syllabus to assess them, show them how to do it. Because chances are they've never done it before, especially if they're freshmen. And it's second nature to us. We think, oh, I'm just asking them to write an essay. But if they've never written an essay before, that's scary. So be sure that you prepare students for their assessments, not just covering the material, but also covering how to prepare for your tests and for your papers. And I will say this as an English teacher, if you assign a paper to your students, then you have to become a writing teacher, because the first year writing program can't teach students all over the campus how to write that one paper in that one class. We teach generalities, general writing practices. It's up to you to teach your students how to write that paper that you want to see, okay? So that's just something else, again, that has to do with the environment that you establish in your own class. For those students who feel the pressure of low stakes, I've got to make a certain grade in this class, I've got to make a certain grade on this test, how do you lower the stakes? This seems counterintuitive. You up the number of assessments. If they're worried about how they're going to do on a certain paper and it counts 85% of their grade, that's not good. Maybe give them 3 smaller papers that count less each. Not only are they and I'm talking about papers, you can substitute in the word quiz, you can substitute in the word exam or test, whatever works, but am I getting close? Okay. But increasing the number of those and lowering the weight will actually take some of the pressure off of those students, okay? Again, prepare your students for assessments. On this slide, self-efficacy, use frequent formative assessments or feedback. Give your students feedback. If they're nervous about their performance in your class, if they're not sure how they're doing, make sure that they are sure how they're doing, and that encourage them to come to your office also for feedback. That'll help, okay? So moving on quickly, because they tell me I'm almost out of time. Here's some more advice on self-efficacy. I think you'll find all of these really, really practical. On this last couple of slides, just some practical advice. Number one, follow your college's procedure. Don't go Lone Ranger on this. The college has procedures to protect you. Find out what they are for your college and follow them to the letter, okay? Don't make deals with students. Talk about academic integrity early and often. Talk about it on the first day. Now, in the handout section, I've given you a handout that's a sample of an assignment that I actually use. I try to teach my students how to email me, how to write a professional email, and I do that by having them do some research on academic integrity and write me an email about that. So it's just an idea of how you can do two things at one time and have some kind of an assignment that lets you address this on the very first day. Go over your policies. I have 5 minutes, thank you. Go over your policies. Go over your syllabus with your students. I have given you also a copy of my syllabus page and how I go over academic misconduct in my syllabus. I go over this with my students in class on the first day. But this is just a sample on the handout that I've given you of what your syllabus might look like as it relates to academic integrity. Okay? Next to last thing, you are going to have a student who cheats. You're going to have a student who makes a choice to cheat egregiously. You're going to have somebody who downloads a paper. You're going to have somebody who copies from somebody, and don't take it personally. What you need to do is do what you said you were going to do in your syllabus and on the first day of class. What you need to do is follow your college's procedure, okay? Again, it's a choice. There are things we can do to help minimize those choices for students, but some students are just going to make the wrong choice, okay? And you have to deal with that as legal tells you to deal with it, okay? Next to last slide, some additional resources for you. I hope you'll take advantage of those. Last slide. This is new this year, an academic integrity website. It's on the College of Arts and Sciences server, but here's the web address. It's got a wealth of information. There's a tab for teachers, information for teachers on different subject matter related to your teaching. There's also a link for students that you can pull information from and give to your students. Your students can go there and look for it, okay? So please don't hesitate to use this material, to use any of it. And also remember, my email address was on the first slide, and I will be more than happy, even if you're not in the College of Arts and Sciences, if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those. Best way to get me is by email. Okay? Thank you very much.